Good evening, everybody. I am Claire Finn, and our speaker this evening is Olympia Diamond. She completed her postgraduate diploma in Conservation of Easel Paintings at the Courtauld Institute in no, she didn't. She's terribly old if she did that, in 2014. During that time, she was a research associate scholar for the Courtauld Gallery and began to investigate the treatment of water stains on acrylic paintings, which led to a publication and presentation at the AIC Conference in Chicago in 2017. Since qualifying, Olympia has worked for the Guildhall Art Gallery and English Heritage. She was Assistant Paintings Conservator at the National Museum in Liverpool, where she led the conservation treatment and technical investigation of the altarpiece by Bartolomé Esteban Murillo, Virgin and Child in Glory, and its related sketch. She now works as a paintings conservator at Julia Nagle Conservation. So, Olympia, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen now. Thank you very much for that introduction. Before I get started, I'd just like to say that an abbreviated version of this talk was given at Future Talks Conference in 2019 at the design, which was held at the Design Museum in Munich. And a post-print paper will be published later this year, if anyone would like to look further into this after the talk. The version I'm giving tonight is slightly more in depth and will explore the preparation process in greater detail, as well as touch on the logistics of buying time to carry out all the testing that was necessary. And importantly, myself, Julia Nagle, Anna Cooper, and Donatella Bonti are the authors of this presentation and the paper, which is coming out later this year. And I also want to emphasize that this was very much a team effort that involved not only a number of people in our studio, but across several institutions and countries. So it was, as I hope you'll see as I go on, all the people involved and the many hands that made this possible. So I'll start. We'll introduce the painting. So Timescape 030, made in 2016 by British artist Darren Almond, is a large painting on aluminium composed of water-resoluble acrylic paint and gouache. The painting is made up of layers of sprayed colors and is one of a series of works entitled Timescape, which the artist describes as analog time paintings. The impression of receding space and nebulous colored forms was spoiled when rain from an open window disrupted the water-resoluble medium, creating a multitude of glossy drip marks. The change in surface gloss destroyed the desired effect, rendering the work unexhibitable. The painting was brought to Julia Nagle Conservation, which I'll refer to as JNC from here on out, a private conservation studio in London, specializing in modern and contemporary paintings. It was brought in 2017, where we embraced the challenges of devising a suitable treatment that included considerations for the subtle image with its nuanced color transitions, the artist's desire for a perfectly uniform surface, the presence of water-resoluble acrylic medium, and the absence of established methods. A collaborative approach involving JNC, the artist, Tate Conservation Science, conservators at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, and scientists at the University of Pisa was essential to success. This presentation describes the context, rationale, and processes that were used. Darren Almond produces film, installation, sculpture, photography, and painting. His works deal with abstract ideas of time, space, history, and memory, and how these concepts relate. The Timescape paintings developed from a photographic series titled Full Moon. where Almond traveled across the world taking photographs with long exposure times to capture landscapes and record the passage of time under moonlight. During a full moon shoot in Patagonia in 2013, the artist observed that there, the atmosphere is very clear. There's far less light pollution, and you're able to literally see the colors of the night sky. This marked an important shift from recording the physical landscape on Earth to capturing the celestial landscape. After witnessing the night sky in Patagonia, Almond painted a series of constellation images, placing tiny colored dots precisely within a printed grid on black painted paper. With titles such as Celestial Atlas, they resemble constellation charts. Almond subsequently moved away from the formality of the grids and scaled his process and concept up to painting on large pieces of aluminum sheets. He continued to work with acrylic medium, but embraced a completely different technique as he attempted to capture the colors and shadows, to visualize the atmospheric medium and celestial matter of the night sky. This became the Timescape series. You can see Timescape 030 here in the middle. This is taken before treatment and appears duller than the adjacent paintings. Timescape 030 was painted on aluminium. The metal was keyed before being coated with white etch primer and white pre-catalyst primer. 4 applications of black acrylic ground were sprayed on top of the white, forming a solid black underlayer. He creates the visual surface effects with the manual application of many fine spray coats of Largescale water-resoluble aquaquil paint, mixed with Largescale 2032 medium to matte. This process produces a subtle blend of modulated primary colors, suggesting the prismatic dusky twilight and creating a uniform matte surface finish. The layered sprays result in a depth to the surface in which colors and voids are gradually revealed to the viewer and change as the viewer moves around the work. Lastly, 2 stars, one blue and one yellow, were added in gouache with additional acrylic medium. The stars stand slightly proud of the surrounding paint and are about 2 millimeters in diameter. Timescape 030 was damaged while on exhibition when rain from an open window landed on the painting, causing extensive drip marks. These interrupted the gradual perception of color and distance, leaving a pockmarked surface totally at odds with the artist's intention. The drips varied in length up to 3 centimeters long, with glossy outlines and matte centers. These 2 micrographs on the side show you the details with the glossy outlines. Here. The glossy rings are a result of surface material being displaced by the rainwater and pooling as the water evaporated. When examined under magnification, it appeared the rainwater had affected a transparent surface layer. Timescape 030 is owned by the artist, and the cost of treatment would be covered by the borrowing institution's insurers. Discussions involved all stakeholders, and the principal challenge was to get people to understand the length of time that would be involved in developing a viable solution to this novel problem. This issue lasted the length of the project and was further complicated by the difficulties involved in clearly explaining to non-conservation professionals how we would tackle the problem, while in fact, we were still figuring that out ourselves. Darren Almond's involvement and support were essential, as he was fully behind trying to rectify the damage and was happy to be consulted throughout the process. The full backing of the artist helped pacify the other stakeholders and buy us the time we needed. And it's thanks to him that we've been able to share the details of this treatment. Sorry, I'm just adjusting something on my screen. Okay. The artist generously provided a sample painting made of similar materials for testing. This was crucial as there was no discrete place to test on the artwork. The test panels had prepared in the same way to Timescape 030 and was executed on a solid sheet of aluminium. Though it was not an exact like for like due to different colors used, varied range of gloss effects, and different exhibition history, we focused the majority of the testing around the monochromatic smooth section as this most closely resembled the original. Explorations began by replicating the damage on the artist's supplied test panel. Slightly acidic water was needed and was flicked onto the surface. Testing was carried out to assess the solubility parameters and see how the surface was affected by cleaning. The paint proved porous, sensitive to mechanical action, with a tendency to saturate and darken when exposed to free solvents, and surprisingly, and unsurprisingly, I should say, to form tide lines. Because of the uniform surface, the amorphous image, risk of uneven solvent application, exposure inconsistency, clearance, and possible pigment pickup were all considered. Water proved to be the best solvent for removing the glossy marks, but to achieve the desired uniformity, a limited amount would have to be applied evenly and without mechanical action. Testing, therefore, focused on rigid gels and tissues. The opacity of tissues and fine textures that could leave an impression in the damp paint made rigid gels the more viable option. Agarose gel was selected for testing due to its high water retention, limited surface adhesion, and controlled water release, adjustable by varying the concentration. Here you can see one of our tests. Here are the drip marks. Those were the drip marks that we made. After agarose gel exposure, there was a visible increase in color intensity. The agarose gel was effective at removing the glossy tide lines and reinstating an evenness that the rainwater had disrupted and leaving a more uniform appearance after treatment, which is of paramount importance. So here, this top of this drip right here is this top right here for reference. So you can see all the other drips were removed, and when viewing it in raking light, you do get a uniform surface is achieved again. The gel plates were examined and showed no pigment pickup or color change on the gel plate. But as you can observe, especially in the raking light, there is a change to the surface gloss in the location. The agarose, so I hope you can, sorry, got a little lost in my talk, all fine. So I'm pointing out here that there's a change in the surface gloss in the location where the agarose was in contact with the surface. So we did notice that. So though we got the uniform surface and we were able to remove the drips, we were obviously, something was changing on the surface. So to help quantify and understand the visible changes, we teamed up with Tate conservation scientists, Dr. Bronwyn Ormsby and Dr. Judith Lee, to take color and gloss measurements of the painting before gel application and to compare these with readings taken after treatment. To investigate the nature of the material removed with the gel application, gas chromatography mass spectrometry analysis was conducted both on a paint sample taken from the edge of the painting and on a sample of agarose gel used in the tests. GCMS analysis was conducted by Professor Francesca Modugno and Dr. Jacopo Lanassa at the University of Pisa in Italy. We knew we would need a lot of agarose for the treatment and had to decide on what kind to use. Therefore, the different varieties of agar available, ranging from laboratory to food additive grades, we decided to use high-grade agarose with a low EEO. The purest grade was not necessary for this treatment and was detrimentally expensive. So we used this easy bioresearch, ultra clear, quick dissolving agarose, and I just included that in case anyone was curious and didn't know where to start, basically. Further small-scale tests explored agarose concentrations, thicknesses of gel, and exposure times to determine our optimum treatment parameters. Agarose gel at 4% seemed to be ideal, not releasing too much moisture, flexible enough to conform to the paint surface, and effective at removing the glossy marks. While good initial contact with the paint proved crucial, exposure times on the test panel ranged from 30 seconds to 1 hour with little observable difference. Here you can see the surface after various exposure times and the minimal difference between them when viewed in raking light. So here you can see, especially after 5 minutes upwards to an hour, there's negligible difference surface effect. I would like to take the time now to point out this 5 minutes, there's an opaque sort of bubble here, and that's when that occurs when the gel is not in adequate contact with the surface. There is an air bubble in there. And if you look in the after application shots head on, you can see there's a slight V here difference, and especially visible in raking light, where you can see where there was no contact, you cannot, and a uniform surface is not achievable. So that's just to emphasize on a small scale, even on a small scale, contact is of a paramount importance. Following these promising results, using the test panel, a small area was trialed on the original painting. The behavior and empirical observations were comparable to those on the test panel, which, as anyone who's worked with mock-ups or test panels before, is not always the case. The artist was invited to the studio, and Almond liked the results of the tests, particularly the increase in color intensity, and was happy for us to move forward. Returning to the test panel, protection for the 2 stars had to be considered, as they were carried out in gouache, a different water-soluble medium. Replica stars were painted on the test panel to determine if they would be affected by exposure to agarose plates. The stars were found to swell and were partially removed after exposure to the gel plates, which also caused some of the gouache to bleed into the surrounding paint film. So this image shows here, you can see the 2 dots on the test panel. Those are some of our test stars. And this gel plate shows how much the gouache was transferred during exposure. So obviously this was something that would need to be remedied. So several ideas were tested involving including microcrystalline wax, cling film, different adhesives, and a variety of substrates. Based on the tests, the best protective covering was attained with 12 micron thick Melanex, cut to size and coated in Largescale 498 HV adhesive. The Largescale 49 HV was painted out on the Melanex sheet and was left to dry, after which discs roughly the same size as the stars were cut out. The Largescale had a slight tack as it was warmed slightly during handling, and when it was positioned on top of each star, that slight tack allowed it to stay stuck in position, ensuring close contact throughout the agarose treatment. The Melanex was removable without damage to the gouache, and when in place, it allowed the agar sheet to remain in full contact with the surrounding paint layer with no ring or tide line created around the protective coating. So this image on the right shows you can see this is the little disc right here covering the star on Timescape 030. Further parameters were explored to refine the method for large-scale gel application. The parameters established by the small gel test were accurate when scaled up. 4% agarose was ideal, as this resulted in a visually homogeneous paint surface and was firm enough to handle. The gel at 5% was too rigid to conform uniformly to the surface, and the gel at 3% was too floppy to be manipulated in large sheets. Gel thicknesses were also trialed, and 0.5 centimeters was selected based on handling. Application time was increased to at or above 10 minutes when the plate size increased. This was to reflect the time needed to place the plate and remove air bubbles, thus ensuring even contact. So the feasibility of treating the whole painting with a single large agarose gel plate was considered, but it meant that over 16 liters of agarose would be needed to be spread evenly across a 210 by 154 centimeter surface for a set time, then removed safely in one go. The considerable practical challenges associated with making and handling such an enormous agarose gel plate meant that the idea was rejected, and we decided to explore using multiple agarose plates instead, recognizing the risk that this approach could create new marks at the junctions. Because the movement of water in agarose gel is bilateral diffusion as well as capillary action, two plates with optimal lateral contact can behave as one single plate. 9 large plates were trialed and placed butted together on a test panel. That's what you can see in the top image. The agarose removed the drip marks and resulted in a consistent surface gloss wherever it was in close contact with the paint surface. However, new lines formed at some of the joins and some glossy drips remained where contact was inadequate. Tests showed that to obtain even, reproducible results and minimize the risk of making new marks, the gel plates needed to be homogeneous in composition and thickness, and to have a smooth, flat surface without bumps or bubbles in close contact with the paint. To reduce the risk of making new lines, the edges of the gel plates had to be square and perfectly straight to ensure maximum lateral contact. Crucially, these large-scale tests proved that if new marks were created during the first treatment, they could be removed with the subsequent application of agarose gel, cut to shape, and positioned on the affected area for 5 to 10 minutes. So here on the left, this is a residual join mark that occurred during this 9 gel plate test. So this residual join mark, we're able to locally apply a thin sliver of agarose gel for 5 to 10 minutes, and that was able to reduce that join mark. And here you can see is a much more even surface. So ideally, we'd like to avoid the creation of join marks, if at all possible, but this flexibility on timings and the ability to address residual lines meant that an overall treatment with multiple carefully crafted and accurately applied agarose gel plates was indeed feasible. The refined method was tested on Timescape 030 with positive results. Here you can see the close contact and squared edges of 2 plates. So in this image on the left, these are 2 plates. This is their join line right here. And as you can see on the right, the result was a smooth, even surface where the 2 plates acted as one. So you can see the shift right there. In order to minimize variables and to help ensure an even overall result, we decided the treatment should be carried out in one go without stopping. Also, just as a reference, this red line, so it doesn't confuse anyone with what the painting looked like, this red thread is how we gridded up the painting to visually track and document. So the red thread is adhered to the back of the painting with masking tape. And this grid ensured that we were accurately able to photograph the painting in normal and raking light before and after treatment for comparison and track our work. So something so amorphous had to be sort of rigorously gridded up to be tracked, which is quite interesting. So in preparation for the treatment, We wanted to work with the largest gel plates possible to limit the number of joins. The gel plate size was in part dictated by equipment. We had a microwave oven, standard glassware, and commercially available trays to use as molds. The largest smooth bottom trays we found measured 31.5 by 52 centimeters. However, the need for perfectly square edges meant the plates were trimmed to 30 by 50 centimeters. The painting was therefore divided into rectangles based on these dimensions, and 21 plates would be used measuring 30 by 50 centimeters and 7 measuring 4 by 30 centimeters. After testing numerous ways of cutting the gel at 90-degree angles, a mount cutter running between 2 rulers over a cutting mat was successful. You can see in the top right, this is the mount cutter setup that we used, and this is a lovely crisp edge as a result. We tried lots of things. We tried pizza cutters, we tried scalpels, but none of them were straight enough to give us a repeatably accurate edge. So we recorded the preparation of the gels, which took place over 3 days before the treatment day. We had to consider how long the gels would remain effective, the time needed to accurately make and cut them, as well as how to store them. I'm going to play a short video so you can see the process firsthand, and I'll make some comments along, but there is visual text to help as well. So similar to when you're making up smaller proportions of agarose, it has to be heated to boiling, but with such a large portion, the heating time was much longer than if you were making up a smaller gel plate. So this is preparation of the trays. So we used thicker Malinex to line the trays and removed all the air bubbles so that we get as flat a surface as possible that would be in contact with the paint surface. So here's Donna's pouring out the gel, trying to get as level as possible and removing any extra bubbles that might have appeared. After the gel cooled, it was transferred to be cut. So here Nal's cutting the gel plates, and she's using 0.5 centimeter Kappa mount board as a size guide. And after it was cut, it was wrapped in thin Malinex, and it was stored in a cool closet until we were ready for treatment. So this grid is shows how we physically divided the painting up with the size of the gel plates that we prepared. So these larger rectangles are representative of the 30 by 50 centimeter agarose gel plates, and these thinner rectangles are representative of the 4 by 30 centimeter agarose gel plates that were prepared. With the aim of achieving as consistent a result as possible while accommodating the practicalities of applying and removing 28 large gel plates, a system of laying plates on the painting and removing them at regular intervals was devised. time tests had shown that there would be no visual difference between areas exposed to the gel from 10 to 20 minutes, provided contact was good. We allowed 3 minutes to carefully lay each plate to ensure there was adequate time to align the plate without rushing or putting us under any pressure. We calculated which direction to apply the plates and found starting in the bottom right corner and moving across horizontally. So that is starting here and moving across this direction, and then back down here and moving across that way. So moving in this manner allowed for at least 11 minutes of lateral contact with the adjoining plate before the gel plates were removed after 20 minutes. To achieve this, a well-rehearsed team working in close collaboration was required. And as with all teams, practice was necessary. We needed 7 conservators to carry out the smooth application and removal of the gels. 4 of us had been working regularly at JNC, and 3 were in for the day to carry out the treatment. Therefore, we needed to rehearse. We met first thing in the morning. Clear roles were given to each person. We then practiced on the test panel using sheets of paper first instead of the gels. This was to get a sense of how we would move around the work and to understand the timing intervals for the placement and removal of each plate. Once everyone was comfortable, we then moved on to practicing with the large gel plates. We had made up extra gel plates, one for practicing, but also in case one broke or something during the treatment. We were practicing with the large gel plate so that everyone could get familiar with how they handled. At this stage, we also practiced each other's roles so that we could be able to step in and help if we needed to at any point. We wanted to be able to continue the treatment without break to ensure the plates had the best chance of acting as a single unit. So once everyone felt confident, we were ready to go. So the team included 2 conservators to lay the plates, 2 to smooth them down, ensuring homogeneous contact with the paint film and eliminating any air bubbles. 2 more conservators to carefully remove each plate after 20 minutes. And a 7th conservator was tasked with keeping time and instructing the others exactly when to place and remove each plate. 2 additional people filmed and photographed the treatment. The treatment was carried out without pause and completed in 1 day. So we were able, due to the filming and photography, to create a short film from the treatment day to help illustrate everything I've been talking about. So I'm going to play the clip. A longer version of this clip is on our website, and we're going to try and post it on our Instagram tomorrow. So if anyone wants to rewatch it, and it is the longer version, that's where you can find it. So I'll play the film clip now, and hopefully, even if you've seen it before, hopefully now with this introduction, this will give you a bit more context or understanding to what's going on. So you can see the timekeeper is waiting to give us the signal. So we lay it at the exact time that's necessary. There she goes. And I hope this gives you a good sense of how the plates handled and moved. They were very floppy. So the opaque areas that I pointed out earlier, those are the air bubbles, so you can see them moving and being pushed out. The leather weights were used where air bubbles couldn't be fully removed, so they were used to ensure local even contact where necessary. It's a nice shot of the 2 stars. And this final shot is you see a nice raking angle. So once the plates are removed, you really get a sense here of how much moisture was on the surface that gradually, as it evaporates, the painting returns to its more matte surface finish. So after all the gel plates were removed, as mentioned earlier, we did anticipate that despite our best efforts, there might be some thin residual lines that would occur at some of the joins of the agar plates. And there were minimal marks. The following day, the marks were successfully removed with the subsequent application of thin strands of agarose gel cut to shape and positioned on the affected area for 5 to 10 minutes. So the successful treatment removed the drip marks, leaving an even, uniform surface, as can be seen here. So this is a detail before with all the drip marks, and this is the same area of the painting after treatment. You can see the uniform surface finish has been returned. Darren Almond returned to our studio to assess the results and was delighted. To the artist's eye, it appeared the painting had been cleaned, and he described the colors as being lifted, which was a massive relief. We're all really excited. The change in the paint surface after treatment with the gels was due to the removal of transparent surface material that had been affected by the drip marks. The gel plates used during the treatment were retained for reference and examined and showed no pigment pickup. GCMS analysis and color and gloss measurements were undertaken and provided the evidence and support for this challenging treatment. 2 agarose gel test plates and 1 paint sample from Timescape 030 were sent to the University of Pisa for pyrolysis GCMS analysis. The analysis performed on the samples of agarose gel after application on the artwork showed no traces of methyl methacrylate or any other molecular markers that can be related to the absorption of acrylic resin onto the gel surface. This meant that if the acrylic medium was removed, then the amount was below the detection limits of the instrument, which were already very low. Another hypothesis is that the material removed during treatment was not acrylic medium, but a component or components of the original paint formulation, likely surfactant, that had migrated to the surface as the paint aged and cured. The non-absorbent aluminium support may have exacerbated the upwards direction of this migration, but further investigation to identify the surface layer was not pursued. Tests with agarose gel showed that the treatment would slightly alter the appearance of the painting. Thus, color and gloss measurements were conducted in collaboration with the Conservation Science Department at Tate to quantify and record any changes. Color and gloss measurements were initially carried out on small test areas for a preliminary assessment, then repeated across the whole painting before and after treatment. So just in case anyone's wondering, that the painting is not glossy. This is a thick layer of Melanex that's applied on the surface that shows the areas where gloss measurements and color measurements were to be taken, just so no one thought the painting looked significantly different there. Analysis of the data revealed that changes in gloss as a result of cleaning were negligible, and it is unlikely that this change would be perceptible. A visible color change was noted in tests and occurred on the painting. The color change was minimal and characterized by a move away from the yellow-red and towards the blue-green. Therefore, the colors became cooler in appearance, and this was consistent with the visual observations when, after cleaning, blue and purple-violet colors became more noticeable. So I hope this is the before and after picture next to each other. And if you do look in the bottom half of the painting, you can see the blue and the purple violet colors are more pronounced. The full spectrum of colors used by Almond were more saturated, resulting in a stronger sense of depth and transition as you moved around the work. The success of the treatment of Timescape 030 depended on a combination of understanding Almond's materials and aesthetic aims, evaluating recent research into gels, collaboration with conservation scientists, and having access to the artist test panel for trialing and refining the method before it was applied to the painting. Collaboration with the artist resulted in discussion and assessment of the painting, of the surface of the painting at all stages, which ensured that the aesthetic integrity of the work was restored by the treatment. In resonance with the painting's subject matter, success demanded spatial and temporal precision, both in preparing the agarose plates and in their careful placement. While the image itself was amorphous, retaining this effect required the sectioning of the painting into regularly sized rectangles and exact timekeeping, which resonated with Darren Almond's earlier gridded constellation charts on paper. I'm going to end with this picture taken a couple minutes after the final plate was removed during our treatment, which, besides highlighting all the fantastic people involved, it also gives you a lovely shot down the painting, showing not only the color spectrum that's visible, but also the different gradations of moisture as the gels were removed, as the gel plates were removed. You can track the visible moisture left on the surface as it's drying, which is this. So helps get you understand what it looked like during the treatment. And last but definitely not least, we'd like to thank all those whose support, guidance, and use of analytical equipment made this treatment possible. So it was a massive team effort. So thank you very much. And that's it.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Olympia.
No problem. And I know
extremely impressed by the choreography and also how you managed to keep your clients at bay, economically speaking. Now we have a number of questions. I'll just go through them chronologically. I'm wondering what other avenues you considered and or tested before pursuing agarose and gel sheets. I think you did sort of cover that a bit, because you discovered that anything that involved, rubbing wasn't a good idea.
Yes. Before I answer that, I'd also like to say Donatella Bonti and Julia Nagle are here. So all three of us will be addressing questions because everyone, as you saw, it was so involved. Everyone did specialize a bit in terms of aspects of the treatment that they were doing. Just so if someone else answers, that's why. But yes, we did. There were tissues that were considered. We were trying to, the importance was how to apply things uniformly. So quite quickly, anything that wasn't in a gel or really contained form was really untenable to be readily reproducible across the painting. So things were trialed, but quite quickly, like they were put aside. Yeah.
How did you ensure there were no air bubbles on the larger sheets? I'm assuming this is a manual manipulation question.
That one has been answered since. So I think that people were asking that initially, but I think they've said that they've been answered since. So I think
oh yeah,
okay. I might have zoned out from it. Ignore bubbles question. Yeah, I've got down to that. That has been answered. Did you notice that the freshness of the agar had an impact in the effectiveness of the gel? Cutting and storing didn't dry the gel? Question mark.
Do you want me to answer that, or would you like to?
Yeah.
I mean,
whoever, yes.
That as well. So we had so the gels, you could keep them for about 3 days as long as they were wrapped in the Melanex and they were in a cool cupboard. So we adapted our cupboard in our kind of spray room, which is quite cool. And we made new shelving out of the Kappa mount board, and they were all in there and it was up to 3 days, I believe. Is that right? It's quite a long time ago.
I think we prepared all the gels in the 2 days before the treatment, and we did some storing tests, and the fridges were not good. And yeah, we did some tests, and that up to 3 days they're okay after they start, to have an impact on the treatment.
What sort of impact? Is this like the
well,
food in your fridge, it grows mold, or what?
To dry and eventually they become moldy. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's sort of, yes, like cookery. Could you please clarify on the quantity of water used for the preparation of the gels? So you say the pH, and if distilled or tap was used.
So shall I answer?
Yeah.
We use deionized water. So the deionized water is slightly acidic, but we didn't modify the pH of the water. So we used deionized water as it was.
It is sort of related, but was agar gel used with distilled water? Would playing with tonicity improve the effects? Tonicity? Toxicity? I don't understand this question.
Catatonic and hypertonic.
Okay.
We didn't do testing for changing the tonicity of the gels. One of the things that we discussed a lot is whether we wanted to have other components in our aqueous solutions in the gels. But of course, having other components, like for example, salt to change the ionic strength and then the tonicity of the solution would have meant that then we would have had to use a clearing stage, which is what we wanted to avoid with the treatment and with this particular painting. So for us, it was important that the system that we use was as simple as possible in order to avoid the necessity to have subsequent stages to the clearing.
Was the color change due to removal of surfactants from the surface of the painting? Did the artist confirm that the after treatment results conform to the original appearance of the work?
To go, I don't mind. I'm happy to. I mean, we are confident that we didn't remove the acrylic medium and there was no pigment in the gels. We carefully kept all of the gel plates and they were numbered in the same way as they were before they went on the painting so that we could compare afterwards. It's very commonly known that surfactants do come out of acrylic paint, and it's also very likely, given that there are layers and layers of acrylic and on top of, as Olympia has described, a completely impervious acrylic, aluminium panel, that the most likely thing was that it was surfactants and they were quite readily water soluble. So it's a clean, and I'm very happy to stand up and be counted that we cleaned the painting. I have no problem with that. We took off all of the, you know, the disrupted sort of film on the surface. We took off surfactants probably, we're pretty confident. I think Donatella would hopefully agree with me that we're quite confident about that.
We did the color measurement. Initially, we wanted to do the color measurement in order to have a record of the changes that we were doing on the painting. But the results of the color measurement says, yes, there is a color change, which is noticeable. And has been picked up also by the measurements, but the color change goes, as Olympia mentioned, from the green, from the red yellow to the blue green side of the spectrum, which is usually what happens when you do a cleaning. You know, you remove a layer which is yellow or yellowish, and this is what the color measurement has told us, has indicated us. So yes, we are thinking of it as a cleaning, and I think that Darren Almond said this has been brought back to life, or I can't remember the exact words that he used.
Yeah. He said the colors have been lifted. He was really pleased with the saturation and the vibrancy that the painting had. So that he was happy. It was pleased with that. So that's.
The movement of surfactants, I know, is incredibly complex, and it happens rather distressingly at room temperature. So I don't know scientifically, but I can imagine that it would sort of, rather than discolor, it sort of veils the original colors, by way of a better description. So removing that veil, if the artist was happy, we're okay. Next one. Fantastic treatment, well done. You mentioned transparent surface material that was affected. Oh no, I think we do you know what the varnish? No, we think it's surfactant. I think we
I think
very interesting presentation. Sorry. Yeah. What was the total cost of the agarose? And this is from Denmark.
Could you send me an email and I can answer that? I don't have the figures to hand, but I can happily answer that. And the difference between the really sort of highly pure.
I know, I had to order the wretched stuff. Yes.
It's massive. So I'm very happy to answer any of those sort of more numerical questions. I don't have the answers to hand, but I'm very happy to answer them on an email if people want.
So if you don't have Julia's email, send an email to me, which you do have, and I'll get to Julia.
I can put it on the chat.
Put it in the, okay, well, hang on. Yes. How long did this entire process take from research stages to completion?
Well, in terms of this, it wasn't worked on like every day, all day, but when we added up all of the hours, it was 32 days. All the hours was 32 days of testing and research, 3 days of preparation, and then 1 day for the treatment.
Yeah. So that's slightly over a solid month. For how many people?
That was, well, like it was there was, let's
It was
see.
varied, didn't it? Because there were 7 on the day, but there were actually sort of, I think in terms of the timing and in terms of the cost, the main issue was actually, though like you rightly said, Claire, it's about a month, it actually was spread over a year.
Yeah.
And that's the point to me, is that it's all about the thinking time as well, isn't it? And so that was major.
Which
And
somehow doesn't go on the spread on the timesheet.
no, I don't mind that necessarily too much. I mean, especially if we're able to share the results. The problem for us often is that you do all of that and then you're not allowed to share anything because everyone wants to keep it all, you know, the clients don't want it shared. So I think it's kind of worthwhile, and it's really good fun to be able to sort of do this and test things and push boundaries with what we're doing. But it was really difficult to, I mean, we actually had the client, the client wants sort of, we had a code on the telephone for when they rang, so only I would speak to them. I would say it was hard, you know, that side of it was really hard, but mainly because it's really difficult for people to understand what we do and the complexity. And you know, at one point they even said that they would just take it to someone who knew what they were doing. So you have to, you know, have quite a tough shell, and I think partly that's.
I mean, how do you do that? Because I mean, I've been involved in something and they did take it away, and they took it away to somebody that they had to take it away from because they'd done so much damage.
I think in a way, you know, the more that we are able to share what we do and the more that we're able to explain it and that people understand there's a scientific element and all these things, that's got to help. But of course for us, you know, having the artists support us was brilliant, because the actual cost of the restoration was equivalent to the cost of the painting. So it could have just been like, okay, you get a total payout and here's your ruined painting back, you know, or it becomes the insurer's property. So in this case, having the artist on side was really major.
Yeah, and also
I would imagine that was crucial.
Yeah, and also having him so involved at the different stages allowed, as Julia said, I said it was 32 days, but that's adding up all the hours. It was over a year. So if he came in at different stages, then that sort of allowed, it kind of put people at ease, like every stage that was sort of understood by him and moved along, you know, kind of had to like calm everyone else down a bit, you know, if he's as he's involved. So that was a big help.
Okay, thank you for an amazing talk. Would you mind repeating how the gouache styles were protected during the treatment and why you chose that method?
Yeah, sure. That's basically the 12 micron thick Melanex, Largescale 498 HV adhesive was painted out onto the Melanex and then allowed to dry. And Largescale 498 can be heat activated. So it was such a thin layer, but when you then handled it, it became slightly warmed and had a slight tack. So therefore, after it was painted out, the Melanex with the Largescale on it was cut to roughly the same size as the star. And then as it was in your hand being handled and cut and then positioned to be placed on the star, a slight tack would develop with the Largescale adhesive. And then that was just positioned directly on top of the star. And then with that slight tack, it just stayed. So the tack wasn't strong enough, the adhesive wasn't fully activated, so it wouldn't adhere to the gouache and pull off, but it was slight tack enough that it would stay in position throughout the treatment. So yeah, that's that.
Okay. Is that, how did you get such an even surface when making the gel plates? And how long can you keep, oh no, we've answered this, the agarose plates before using it on the painting. We said 3 days. I'm intrigued to know what the dishes were. What were they? Clearly not to make agarose gel on.
Where the tray.
The trays,
Yeah, were trays. And actually, I think we bought them from a cooking company.
Yes,
We
they're just
search for the blades, and the blades needed, of course, to be flat, but also to be of the right dimension, which ideally would have been a multiple of the dimension of the painting. How did we make them? Well, we did a lot of testing also for the production of the gels, and we adhered, as I think it was shown in the video, we adhered a piece of thick Melinex on the bottom of the tray, and we adhered it with dampening slightly the Melinex, so it was fully adhered. And then when the melted agarose is poured, you have to make sure that while it is still liquid, so quickly, it is evenly spread across the surface of the tray. I have to also say that the tray were slightly modified at the corner in order to be able to receive the agarose gel without the agarose gel pouring out. So we bought some commercial tray, but then we had to modify them at the corner slightly. And that's how they came.
With Milliput, didn't we?
The important thing is that at least one of the surface is absolutely even and flat. The top surface is always a little bit less even and flat than the bottom one, where we had positioned the Melinex sheet, and that was the import. So they were absolutely homogeneous in thickness, but there was a slight, I think, roughness maybe on the top surface as opposed to the bottom one, which was completely flat and nice.
Next question is very impressive. Thank you for sharing. Did you consider using other rigid gels, for example, agar or a Gelen gum? No? Yes.
So, no, we didn't consider gel and gum. We didn't want to use agar because agar doesn't gel as well as agarose. So agarose is a purified agar gel, and yes, it doesn't gel as well, and plus it's got a higher EO, electroendosmosis number, which can have an effect on the surface because it's negatively charged. So we wanted to use the pure agarose, but I don't think we test gel and gum as a gel system.
No, yeah.
I think once you found something that works really well, it's like, use that. You know, I mean, we already spent a year, so we wouldn't have gone and tested lots and lots of other things once we found. I mean, it was Anna Cooper had recently done the MCP course as well, and that's partly why she had the bright idea of using the agarose, because it will sort of release a certain amount of water in quite a controlled way and then suck it back up as well. So I think,
yeah, and it was Anna's tests that was able to get the percentage quite quickly with the agarose gel that was very controllable in that way. So I think that's why there were a lot of parameters we can control with the agarose. So that's why we continued down that avenue from her tests.
Okay. Were pH measurements and ion concentration measurements made of the raindrop locations due to acidic particles in rainfall?
We didn't take those measurements, but when we recreated the only way we could recreate the damage on the test panel was to use slightly acidic water. So that indicated that. Does that help?
Acid rain. Yes.
Yeah.
Acidic rain.
And also it had come through a window, so it would have come through possibly, you know, metal and all sorts. It's not pure water.
Yeah.
Okay, now here's a question that we've already partially answered, but not altogether. Astonishing work. How long did the research and treatment take in total? What was the value of the painting? So I think this is a question about you know, from the client's point of view, as the balance between your work and the financial gain, of which I would imagine the artist's involvement was crucial.
Yeah, I mean, the value of the painting and the cost of the treatment were equivalent. They had to be. So we have to sort of cut our costs to make sure that we can do it as well to some degree.
Yeah. But you gain from the knowledge of doing the research.
Yes, and also I think the painting, as the artist develops, will go up in value as well. So, you know, at the moment he's quite, I mean, he's a known artist. He's going to be, he's done the installation for the Elizabeth line for the Bond Street tube station. You'll be able to see.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Much.
And yeah, and otherwise it was a dead paint, like it was unexhibitable. So, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's zero or raising it a bit. Yeah. Yeah. Would you consider making more tests to identify the surface material that was removed? The change in color is wrong in the before and after. How would you go about if the artist would not have been around to give his or her opinion on this? Not sure that's a straightforward answer for you.
Answer the first part.
Sorry. Okay, the first one, would you consider making more tests to identify the surface material that was removed? We are assuming it was surfactants, but as I recall, you didn't actually test it.
The paint that was used is an acrylic dispersions, although for some aspect, because for example, it's water resoluble, it behaves like an acrylic solution, but is an acrylic dispersion, and it is known that in acrylic dispersions, surfactants and other additives do migrate to the surface. So this was our assumption. It would have been nice to be able to identify what it was. It was not identified via pyrolysis, GCMS. It would have been nice to have a portable infrared, for example, if it was an organic material. Possibly infrared would have been able to identify what was the substance on the surface, but we consider ourselves lucky enough that in this project we have had a collaboration with the research institutions that have helped us with some of the instrumentation that we needed, and unfortunately we didn't have the availability, or we didn't have it at the right time, we didn't have it on time of other instrumentation to be able to identify the surface material. But yes, it would have been nice to be able.
Ideally, it would have been wonderful, but it all puts the time, money, you know, escalating.
Yeah.
And then the second part, the change in color is quite strong in the before and after. How would you go about it if the artist would not have been around to give his or her opinion on it? It's a tricky one to answer that.
Yeah, because they might not, if he hadn't been involved, they might not have even approved the initial
any of it.
So yeah, that is quite tricky. I think it would have had to, continue to be a discussion with people involved, and based on our testing and analysis that we did, we would have informed our judgment. But
also would have been so difficult without the test panel, because as Olympia said, even with the test panel, which was made in the artist studio with very similar materials, there are differences. And although we can sort of test our own methods on mock-ups, you can't necessarily make a mock-up that's going to be really that similar. So I think it might not have been feasible without the artist, really.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot, that's 100% right, because without the test panel, like absolutely none of that can happen, because there is no place to test. The amount of tests that we did that refined all those parameters were lots of them. This wasn't testing a small corner to see if something works. This was days and days and days of multiple versions of tests at different consistencies and spaces. So without the test panel, there's absolutely no way that treatment could happen.
Yeah. I'm sort of, I'm getting questions from all over at the moment. So you'd recommend to leave it outside the fridge if possible. I'm assuming we're talking about the agarose gel here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
well, when we had some strange
Definitely the painting outside the fridge.
definitely the painting. We had some strange experience with the large sheets of agarose. Up until we were in the doing the test with the smaller sheets, we were always storing our agarose in the fridge. As soon as we started to produce larger sheets and leave them in the fridge, now we were using normal standard kitchen fridges. We didn't have a scientific fridge, and we had some strange results in the sense that we would put the plates, large plates, in the fridge, and the morning after, half of it was frozen. So we started to think that maybe it was due to the fact that it was touching the back. So we were paying attention to leave it so that it was not touching the back of the fridge. But again, half of the fridge or large part was frozen, as in solid, and then it would melt, and the gel would be completely dissolved and releasing water. So I'm not sure if it was because, as I mentioned, our fridges were not up to standard scientific, so the temperature in the fridge is not exactly homogeneous, but it had some undesired effect on the structure of the large plates of gel. And that's when we started to think, is there another way that we could store our gel plates for a short period of time? How much is what this short period of time? Up to 3 days, without leaving them in the fridge. And that's why we store them for only that amount of time, which is 2 days before the treatment, outside of the fridge. But in general, when we have had lower some plates of lower dimension, we store them in the fridge, because the fridge slows down any degradation process that can happen.
Yeah.
I don't know, would you agree, Olympia, that was?
Yeah.
We decided not to store them in the fridge. Yeah.
Yeah, and also when we realized how many plates and the size that we would be working with and the amount, our fridge, we didn't have a fridge big enough to also store them. So when we realized, one, we were having problems with the freezing, and then the actual physical space of the fridge wasn't enough, we did do tests, and we found, like Donna said, within those, after the 2 days of making it, you were able to have repeatable results that matched a fresh plate. But after that, the effectiveness of the agarose plate dropped off significantly, and it wouldn't have been as regularly repeatable across the painting.
Okay. Having had this experience now, would you be able to repeat a similar treatment without a high economic support from an insurance company in the range of private owners or commercial galleries?
Possibly, yes. I mean, we've definitely, we did, yeah, I don't think we had hugely high economic support, I have to say. We've learned a huge amount. A lot of things we know now how to do that we didn't know before. But I mean, all these paintings are sort of quite different one from another as well, aren't they?
No.
So yeah, hopefully it would inform us. We'd be unlikely to get exactly the same thing, but I think, yes, we'd be better informed, and so hopefully would everyone attending this talk.
Okay. Congratulations to the whole team for the beautiful work. I'd like to know if you did tests with the other cleaning possibilities and how you came to decide the agarose. I think we've answered that, haven't we? Cut in if you think we haven't. Is your mount cutter the same as a mat board cutter set at 90 degrees angle?
Yeah. Mount is mat, isn't it? Same thing.
No, yes.
Yeah.
And then how did you ensure even thickness in each plate?
That was based on the calculation. For every batch that we made, we calculated the amount of powder and water so that that quantity was the same amount. And then when it was poured on the same size plate every time, that was how it was that was calculated. So it was repeatable that way.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a fascinating treatment and process. Would you be able to talk a little about how all the institutions became involved, such as Tate and the University of Pisa?
Julia, you want me to do it? So that's, well, Donatella worked for you worked at the University of Pisa, didn't you, Donna?
Yeah, I studied and I collaborated with them, there. So that's how, and is the heritage science group there. So Professor Modugno is one of the head of a research group, and there are, and Jacopo Lanasa is, at the time, was a postdoctoral working there. So he was the one that was directly involved in the analysis. So that's how they came involved.
And then with the Tate, it's sort of, because we know they've done so much research into cleaning acrylics, it was kind of interesting for them as well to get involved and to see what was happening. And because it's sort of, I'm not aware of people having done it in this way on this kind of scale before. So I think if you're doing something that is then feeding into the research that institutions are doing, it's sometimes quite nice for them to be able to see practical treatments. And I think that's somewhere really where private practice can really help institutions and vice versa. I think it's nice when there's a big exchange like that, and I think both parties can benefit, really.
I was once asked by a student what's the most valuable thing they could do during their student years, and I said, make friends. And they looked at me as though they thought that I'd shortchanged them. And I said, it's so much easier to ring up your friends when you've got to, something that's slightly beyond, but that they will know.
But I also think in a way it's a two-way street, isn't it? It's informing both parties, because I think in private practice, we have to often find solutions for things. So you have to kind of get on with the job a bit. And I think sometimes that can help institutions where sometimes they, might not have, this might not be needed for an exhibition. It might not be possible to treat certain items. We're all led, aren't we, by curators or sales or whatever it might be. So I just think more collaboration, especially as in what we're doing with the modern and contemporary, is essential. And that's why it's so nice to be able to actually present what we're doing. But I think they were interested and helpful. I don't think it should rely on personal contacts, really. I think if you've got a project that you think might be of interest, I do think it's worth approaching.
I mean, I certainly know that if you've got a project that's interesting, then an institution, you can find an institution who'll help.
Yeah, and also the other, Houston were also really useful, I should say that, because they treated a Morris Lewis with big agar sheets as well, and so they were also really helpful. And we just contacted them because we'd read the article. Don't know them personally. I don't know. It's Samantha Skelton, isn't it? And Sunniva Liz. And we just contacted them because they'd published and said, would you mind talking to us a bit more in detail about what you'd done? And that's also why we wanted to film what we did, because you really want to be able to get a sense of how floppy it is, as Olympia said, and, the feel of it a bit. So hopefully, by doing this, we can all expand our repertoire a bit, really.
Okay, could agarose gel sheets be applied to vertical surfaces? Is there enough moisture in the gel to allow this to adhere safely in a vertical orientation? Is somebody who clearly has a problem.
I'm interested in the spraying of the agar as well, which I haven't. You were supposed to attend a course on that, weren't you, Olympia? But obviously COVID cancelled that.
Yeah. So I don't know anything about spraying, but so that would be an avenue. I think it does. It depends on your surface you're adhering to, and it would depend on how big you were going, I would think.
I'd say do a test. Do a mock-up.
Yeah. So the small ones could, and if you needed it there for a long time, that might be problematic.
Yeah. You can't stand there holding it in place.
Yeah, the smaller ones could do that, but I don't think we could have done ours vertically. Yeah.
here's a bit of a speculative one. Would this method be as effective on a textured surface, please?
Well, the surface was actually textured, not as dramatically with impasto or anything like that, but because it was sprayed, it had little, like the paint was like is a sprayed surface, so it wasn't a flat, smooth film, which is why the 4% was not as rigid and did conform to the surface better than when we tried the 5%, which was actually too rigid. But I think if you had like quite pronounced texture or impasto, I don't think that these plates would have worked. Yes, Julia?
It might be better to consider something like one of the Peggy gels for really textured surfaces, and even like you know, they can be wrapped around ropes and all sorts of things, so they are much more flexible, aren't they, Donna? I think.
Yeah. There are some of the Peggy gums that conform and can really be used in very impasto surfaces. But also I've read, I haven't used it, we haven't used it, but I've read that some people pour the melted agarose on a texture surface and then let it gel on the surface. Now, of course, you need to test whether it's safe with the temperature, but that could be also another option to try. So either a slightly different gel, which can be modified like the Peggy gels, or maybe modifying the procedure for the gelification. So it kind of form a mold on the texture surface.
Now I've come across ones that you can sort of paint on well warm, and then they solidify and you peel them off.
Yeah.
But your paint has to be solid underneath, obviously.
Yeah, and it needs to be,
yeah.
I mean, probably in order to be melted, the agarose need to be around 40, and below it starts to gel, so it needs to be safe to use on the paint.
We've got, I think it's 3 more. Do you have any evidence that the surface of the paint there after treatment is more open to the environment and dirt? Did you try coatings on test picture? I have a feeling that this is how much removing any surfactants makes it a porous, structure, really, I would have thought.
Well, it wasn't a layer that was applied. We didn't remove any varnish or anything like that. So it's sort of no more, the paint film is that it's no more exposed to the environment in that way.
Think had it been more porous, then I wouldn't. I mean, initially, actually, before we talked about cleaning it, there were discussions initially about coating it, not necessarily by us, actually. I wasn't really ever all that keen on that idea. I'd rather clean, and I'd rather clean than actually apply something that isn't there originally. That there wasn't a varnish. Olympia said there is no coating, and I think it would have really spoilt the, I think it's sprayed, and there's sort of very fine pigment particles on the surface, and I think you would have really lost that, as you could almost see with the film from the surfactant, that we assume surfactant sort of film on top. It really obscures it. So I think coating was dismissed. I think much better to remove that dirt and surfactant, which I'm pretty confident it is, rather than actually applying a coating and just further obscuring it, really.
Yeah.
I just, the idea of a coating to me is just sort of, I just don't like the idea on a series of different levels.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Also the spray quality of his work is this matte finish, and the textures of all of these layers that are happening at different levels are what kind of affects how the color shifts as you move. So I think applying anything would significantly alter how that's experienced,
It says, since agarose is so expensive, would you consider reactivate the gel and reuse it? So how did you recycle your sheets? I think this one is about. We're into recycling here.
Yes, it would be nice to recycle. It would be nice to have a way to recycle them. But so once the sheets were used, they were used, and we did receive some material, so they were not pure anymore. So we didn't want to reuse them on anything else. The other thing is true, they can be melted and they can reform the liquid gel, but once the gel is formed, the shell life of the gel form is not infinite. So in order to be able to store them for a longer time, you should go back to the powdery form, which is something that I haven't explored. I'm not sure it's possible, but it's definitely an interesting how to purify the gel once formed and then go back to the powdery form so that you can store it for a longer time. It's interesting in principle.
Well,
yes,
something for us to think about in the future.
Yeah.
The final one that's come through on my phone is somebody had technical issues at the start of the talk and thus missed the section on how you formulated and cast out the agarose. Can you just run over that quickly again?
I think someone did you say will be on Instagram tomorrow?
Yes, yeah, the video. So not of the casting, just the treatment. We're gonna.
You can share that video if that person wants to send me an email or send an email to Painting Conservation. Then we can share the film. I think it would be. I don't really want to go through it all right now, but I'm very happy to share it.
Okay, no, let's stop. I'll reply saying,
what the
I'll forward you the email.
Yeah.
Can you repeat what the Instagram handle is? Someone asked on the chat.
Oh yes, it's JN_conservation.
How very noble of you. Only my dog and my cooking gets on my Instagram.
We have the dog of the week on ours.
Well, I'm going to say thank you very much indeed for a really fascinating talk. And, a really, game changer, I think this is. So thank you very much indeed.